Yes, but
Let's hear it anyway.
All right. I'm Barry Hawkins. I am the lead producer for engineering and live operations within the World of Warcraft team.
I'm Jalen Brack. I'm the executive producer for Warcaft.
Okay. It's pretty short.
Go.
Right.
We're a small group. Just go.
So, Warlords of Draenor is soon out.
Yes.
But it's been quite a while since there was a major content patch.
Yes.
For Mists of Pandaria.
Yes.
And that is a common complaint that you often don't have very much content between the latest patch from the last expansion and the only expansion pack. Are you going to do anything to make sure that's not an issue in the future, or is that something you don't think about?
So the challenge is the insertion or creation of additional content, and that. So let me back up. The first thing to talk about is we've actually tried with different sizes of content over the years, like different kinds of patches, and if it's not a full raid tier, then it ends up not being significant and not being meaningful. And the thing that takes us the longest to make is a raid tier, because it requires an enormous raid, it requires bosses, it requires itemization, it requires boss mechanics, it requires all the art that's involved in creating all those items. So it is a significant amount of time that goes into kind of creating that stuff. So what the trap that we get into is, you know, any work that we're doing on another big patch like that is directly connected to how long it takes for the next expansion to come out. And so that's sort of the push-pull, is how do we do a patch that's sizable and meaningful and still get the next thing to come out as soon as possible, because we can't do both simultaneously. Obviously, we're not happy with the amount of time that it took for the expansion to come out versus when Siege of War came out. Like that, we don't feel great about that. But it's a very challenging problem.
Would it be not possible in Mist of Pandaria that you delayed the other patches, like 5.1 came very soon after 5.0, and then in a short while 5.2, and the only really long wait time was between Siege of Orgrimmar and now Warlords of Draenor. So do you trying here in Warlords of Draenor to delay it? So let's say 6.1 not bring in February, March or April?
Yeah, so we tried to do something different in the past patch progression cycle, where we wanted to do, 2 to 3 month kind of drops, and we messed with the size of what those drops were, right? The like 5.1 was just a little bit of a bite, and then 5.2 was a very giant raid tier, and then 5.3 was a little bit of a bite. And we think that worked okay. I don't think that's necessarily what we're planning for the Warlords time period.
We have a lot of information about the first raid tier, the Black Hand and Ogre. Have you any information about the second raid tier? Will there be just
You'll have to wait for that. Sorry. Yeah, we're intentionally not talking about what comes next.
but you have an idea now?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
We have an idea, and it's in development, and we think you're going to like it.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be scary if we didn't have an idea.
Yeah, it takes us months, many months, to just make the art for what a raid actually is.
Okay.
And so, if we're not already in if we weren't already in progress, we'd be in trouble. But we're already well down that path.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about what it is.
Burning Legion stuff?
I guess you'll have to wait.
Stay tuned.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
You talk about the raids being the most difficult to set up and the most time-consuming and stuff. You've released
That's
some,
one of the things.
Yeah, one of the things.
Yeah.
But you've released some slightly more, let's just say casual patches, slightly more fun stuff.
Yeah.
Judging by the numbers, from your perspective, how do those perform compared to the raid patches? I mean, is there a big enough market for you to try and push more fun stuff, different things than just raids?
Well, even in the raid patches, there's still fun stuff, right? It's, you know, we tried this stuff with 5.1 where, you know, we had the new faction and we had the new quest hub and we had a kind of a storyline that was built in that you would unlock in 5.1. We felt like that was, obviously that's not a raid tier, right? But it was, you know, additional stuff for people to kind of do and enjoy. And, you know, we think it worked okay.
But if you don't put the raid in there, do you think people aren't as interested? That's basically what I'm asking.
It's not that they're not as interested, it's that there's not as much of a, like it's not an obligation as much as it's such a larger thing that players have to do, right? Or players feel compelled to do, or feel excited to do, right? You know, I can't remember like what the exact itemization was for 5.1, but there was maybe just a couple of pieces that were, if you're not raiding, then you got a couple pieces and those were great upgrades. If you were into a lot of the raids, then they were maybe side grades or not, or exactly, not super meaningful. We had a lot of little toys and little different kind of trinket type things that you could get, and that was interesting. But there's nothing more compelling for the player base than I can upgrade my entire gear set, right? And so when we're talking about doing something smaller than that, it ends up being, I think, less compelling overall.
To tack onto that, it's I mean, it's one of the, it's both an exciting privilege and a challenge and responsibility when you think of just how broad and diverse the player ecosystem of World of Warcraft is. And it's actually interesting for us when you get feedback from players or you meet players at events like this and they'll talk about a given patch. And to them, to a raider, they are going to just go on at length about, you know, their thoughts or their experiences with the encounters and their progression there. Whereas for groups where things like, well, like going back to the start of 5.0 with the farm and with changes and enhancements to, you know, our transmogrification system, hearing from people who RP or for whom lore is a big deal, looking at how the nuanced difference of the Pandaria storyline compared to past storylines, that's what they focus on. So, I mean, in any given patch, I think what we're doing is striving to have to serve that diverse ecosystem in a balanced as possible way, given our finite nature as humans. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because from a technical point of view, the aspect of the game you are most proud of, the most amazing feature of World of Warcraft?
By far Garrisons. You know, Garrisons is the largest feature that we've ever put into World of Warcraft. It's taken the most time, it's taken the most, you know, just the number of people that have contributed or worked on Garrisons is enormous. It actually changes the way that people play the game and people level up, and I think we're very excited. Anytime we have something that can be that significant, I think that's very interesting. It offers an offline progression, which we've never really done in this way before. It has ways for you to kind of own a much larger stake of the world and be, you know, a person who, this is my chunk of Draenor that I kind of carved out and protect.
Now, are you speaking from an engineering, like from a technical standpoint, or
Also, but
yeah,
wider sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the exciting and encouraging things for players, you know, it's the 10th anniversary, and some people are like, wow, you guys have been around for a while. And to which we say, yes, we have. And some folks ask, like, you know, where are you at with the engine? Where are you going? You know, are you guys, what are you putting into this thing to keep it going? And if you look at the technology that enabled Garrisons, it's an evolution of using technology to make for richer expression of character progression in the world. For those of you who go back to, like, say, Burning Crusade days, when we really started to do some things with factions, like you would walk by a given shopkeeper, and if you were exalted, they say, we couldn't have withstood the invasion without you, bunny slippers. which you feel awesome about, but you can only do so much with chat bubbles, and after the 9th person walks by, you're like, I don't know that they really value me that much. They're saying the same thing to every guy. And then, we did that with quest text and chat bubbles, and then you saw, if you just flash forward to like farms, suddenly we have something where someone's able to come into the world, and it preserves the integrity of our multiplayer world and the fact that you can't just throw stuff in to have people junking up the environment, but people enter that instance and then have their own farm that they nurture and then build out with infrastructure. And what we're excited about with Garrisons, both from a technology and from an experience standpoint, is marrying design, art, and engineering to make people feel that much more immersed and that much more like a significant figure within the story arc of World of Warcraft. But there are other infrastructure things that we're investing in that we're pretty excited about too, all the way down to the way that files and content are delivered and patched.
When you were doing Mr. Pandaria, you had pretty much a blank page. We didn't know anything about it, so you could tell us whatever you wanted to tell us.
Yep.
This time you've gone back to some very rich lore.
Yep.
Can you talk about the difference in how you plan the story for an entire expansion when some of us already have an idea about it?
Yeah, I think the thing about Pandaria that was interesting is it represented a significant tonal change, right? We were intentionally trying to change the tone of the world that you adventured in, and it was not this working toward fighting the ultimate evil that you had been in previous kind of expansions, right? I think there certainly were bad dudes that you had to take care of and bosses that you had to fight, but the tone felt, was trying to feel very different, much more of an introspective, look at yourself kind of tone. And I think that has a certain set of challenges. With Draenor, there is a lot, as you said, there's a lot of stuff that exists to talk about with Draenor. There's a lot of history, and that's part of the appeal as well, is, in the same way that when we worked on Wrath of the Lich King, there was some stuff known about Northrend. This is very similar, right? There's a lot of stuff known about Draenor, and then we worked on Burning Crusade, so there's a lot of stuff that we know that we want to connect it to. And it's actually very cool. It actually feels, like you're going back and you're seeing, that was the origin of this idea was, what would it be like to adventure in kind of a Warcraft 2 era Draenor with these heroes? And so that's the goal. And so that's pretty exciting.
And it connects pretty well with the 20th anniversary of Warcraft and...
Well, we actually didn't think about that when we were making that decision. That's just sort of a happy coincidence. But for sure it does, absolutely. Warcraft 2, I think, came out in 1995, so yeah, very close to where that anniversary is.
Do you consider making PvE more competitive? Like we have seen challenge modes in 5-man dungeons. Why isn't there a similar concept for raids? Because at the moment it's like when a new raid tier releases, the race to world first is basically the only competitive thing about it. And why I don't know, let us like who's the fastest, who dies at the least.
Yeah, we have talked about that, and I think there's a lot of desire on our part to figure out ways to make raiding PvE competitive in some way. And the reason that actually is such a desire, we've done the live raid at previous BlizzCons, and I think the first time we did it, we were really surprised how well it worked out. We actually didn't think that you guys would like it as much as you ended up liking it. Because I think we did it with Sunwell, and you guys had seen Sunwell, it'd been out for a while. Like, oh, we'll do this Sunwell thing, and we'll watch, the various groups try to be successful in the hardest difficulty mode. But it's turned out very well, and is now very popular and very cool to watch. And now we have 2 guilds that are kind of racing, and you guys are missing that right now. To talk with us for some reason. I don't really know why. But so totally, really, we're taken by surprise by the success of the live raid. It's continued to grow in BlizzCon, and I think it certainly was one of the reasons we have challenge modes, as you talk about, is because of the success of the live raid and things like that, and the amount of people that are watching streams of World of Warcraft on all the different kind of streaming platforms, I think, as well. So that's just to validate everything that you're saying about wouldn't it be cool if we were capturing some more data about that and having some ways to do that.
To chime in on that as well, it's one of the things that's unique about the concept of like competitive rating, competitive PvE, is the number of players compared to most of the other esports or ways that people are watching gaming, experiencing gaming through watching. It's considerably more complex, both from the number of people you have to coordinate and house, and also from having a compelling view into what's going on. But it certainly is something that we're thinking about. I think in recent months and years, we're thinking more and more about how are our players watching other people play with the rise of things like Twitch and esports. And if any of you have caught the arena matches, you may have noticed that our arena spectator mode got a bit of a visual upgrade. So it's certainly how to make that compelling and an experience that the players can enjoy watching as well as being part of is certainly something that we are thinking about.
I got a question very much related to that. So I play a lot of World of Warcraft. I raid.
Me too.
I did all the challenge. I should hope so. Did all the challenge modes and stuff like that. Mostly PvP stuff. I sit out in front of the arena championships, and I still have no idea what's going on there. I mean, I know all the spells. I kind of know the classes, but it's still difficult to watch.
Yes.
I mean, it's a little confusing.
Yes.
Are you, perhaps this is a two-part, are you perhaps taking any steps to try and make it more watchable? I know that you just said that there was a new spectator mode, and that helped, it definitely helped, but it's still a little difficult to understand what's going on. And do you think the PvE is maybe more approachable, or could be made more approachable for people to watch?
Potentially, but not necessarily. And there's a thing. There are levels of consumption in watching competitive PvP, and so like one of the things, or some of the ideas that we grapple with around this topic is there's the casual observer, someone who happens to just be at a bar or a pub, and a match is up there streaming. What sort of experience might pique their interest and make them wonder? And can you visually convey enough of what's going on for them to understand those folks are doing better than those folks? But then there are for the degrees of enthusiasts and participants, it's can you convey enough significant information for them to have that anticipation and that deeper sense of, oh wow, they just got a CC chain off on the healer. This is about to go sideways for those guys. And there's another layer is thinking about that border between what you convey visually and what's left to the shoutcaster or the commentator, because what sometimes happens in competitive gaming viewing is you can go too far and try to say too much, and it's just this. It's like somebody put a bag of Skittles in a blender, to try and have you understand everything that's going on. So one of the things that we're working with commentators and shoutcasters on is what's a good line for us to show and leave you the things to say, that strikes a balance where a degree of aesthetic is maintained.
So just one more follow-up. So you're basically working on making Arena just more approachable for people to watch via those things. I mean, if you watch Twitch TV, it's a little different because you've got this one personality, this one class that you're watching. That's actually what I struggle with. I mean, I've watched some of the big PvPers like Solar Poppin or whatever on Twitch, and I struggle a little less with that. It's usually just the fact that there are 6 classes now when you're watching the spectator mode instead of just the one. Have you ever thought about maybe simplifying that and focusing on one player at a time and showing it from that perspective so that you have a slightly more simplified experience and easier to digest?
Well, simplicity, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder, right? So for some folks, they totally want to see one person followed and jump from person to person. For others, they want to see, I want to view the battleground. You know, I want to view where these opponents are, how they're positioning themselves against those. So
that's the fantasy.
Yeah, that's the fantasy. Yeah. Yeah, those are certainly things that we're thinking about. And I think with the skirmish technology and some of the other improvements we're making to how you arrange for groups of people to play against one another that are coming in Warlords, we're excited to see how that's going to play out and what might evolve from those investments.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You said Garrison is a big feature, or a really large feature of Worlds of Draenor. What will happen to Garrison after Worlds of Draenor?
So we intentionally designed the Garrison with the idea that you will leave it behind. We intentionally decided that your Garrison is going to be part of Draenor. And the next expansion, we don't know what that is yet. We're not talking about what that is yet, but I think it's highly unlikely that it's actually going to be a Draenor. And so this idea that we consciously want to create features where we are able to do something that's very big, very innovative, very bold, very differentiating about that expansion, and then consciously say, and the next time we do an expansion, we've got this new thing. And the reason for that is because we don't want to live in a world, we don't want you to live in a world where the complexity of everything that you have to do is continually growing. You know, if we imagine a lot of the different things that we did from an itemization standpoint in terms of changing stats and changing the amount of enchants that exist and changing the amount of sockets that exist and the amount of, and getting rid of reforging, like this is all to kind of come back a little bit and have a lot less upkeep. Do you remember that time in Molten Core when you got that upgrade and you immediately put it on and were more powerful for the rest of that raid? That hasn't been true for a really long time. And so, you know, trying to come back to kind of what the core is and not have it just be this increasingly larger behemoth that you have to kind of keep going and can't keep maintaining. Does that make sense?
Like as someone with 6 farms, the prospect of building out my garrison and still going back and making sure that the crops are doing well would be a daunting one, and to still do our work.
But you can take your dog with you. That's a little feature.
Yes. So you know it's not all gone, but if there's encouragement to take from this decision to keep things contained, know that in the same way the technical and design elements that gave us the farm were what led to the inspiration for the much richer experience of Garrison. So if anything, moving forward, we can all be excited about what we've learned from Garrisons feeding into that next compelling, you know, additional element.
So maybe follow us or in the next expansion.
We're not going to talk about that.
Yep.
But I will say, you know, we love the farm, and that's what led to the Garrisons.
Yes.
If we all love the Garrisons, then we'll be doing something.
Yeah.
On the topic of Garrisons, so I really enjoy just fiddling around with the Armory app on the phone.
Okay.
Have you ever considered maybe fleshing that out a little bit more, maybe moving the Battle.net app over? That might not be the right thing to ask you, but moving the entire Battle.net app over to iOS, Android, whatever, and perhaps because of the way that it's set up, giving us a chance to treat the Garrison like one of those silly little management sims that everyone plays on their iPhones. Like giving us a chance to do the Garrisons on the go and perhaps throw head battles in there too. I'd love to do it on my iPad.
I would too. So when we first started talking about doing Garrisons, we actually had a conversation about that of like, well, we think, and we started Garrisons over 2 years ago. So it's been a long time in development. And we could imagine this world where Garrisons, where you actually did have your phone and actually you were doing follower missions and things like that, and that sounded really cool. What we consciously decided was And Tom, our game director, put this very succinctly. It's like, I don't actually know how to make, I don't know what Garrisons is going to end up being. I don't know what the fun of Garrisons is going to be. And the idea of chaining, oh, by the way, it also has to work on the phone, along with development of what Garrisons ended up being, we felt was a very difficult prospect. And so we decided, okay, we're not going to do the phone. We're going to just make Garrisons the best thing that it can be. And then if it makes sense for us to kind of go back and try to do that, we can talk about that. I don't think that where we ended up with Garrisons ends up being that compelling of a phone feature on its own. But I do agree that it would be cool to just, hey, I want to do my follower missions and just chick while I'm in line at the bank, or actually no one's in line at the bank anymore, but whatever we're in line for. We're all in queues for something, right? And being able to do your Garrison thing there would be very cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
The thing about Garrisons and farms
Yes.
is that with every new expansion you come out with more content, and you have content then that in a way becomes obsolete. How do you keep that interesting, because you have so much content, and do you have some ways that you use to bring people back into older content?
Do you mean specifically for stuff that's from, like, say, a previous expansion?
No, for instance, if I started playing today,
Yes.
and let's say I was really impatient, so I just bought a ticket to 90.
Sure.
I would be missing out on so much.
Yes.
And it's a little sad to lose out on all of it, but
Sure.
I understand people don't have the patience to level for all of that. But then at max level, how do you reuse the older material you have?
Yeah, one of the hardest things as developers, or at least it was for me at one point in my kind of career, was this idea that you're kind of expressing of, I've made this thing and I have to let it go and I have to leave it behind. It's served its purpose, it's served its time. And the world has moved on, right? And so in this, I have a lot of achievements, but I don't have all of them. And so for me, the motivator is, well, I want to go back and get that achievement. And I don't mind telling you that this weekend, I was actually doing quests in Netherstorm. Because to my surprise, I never got the 120 quests completed in Netherstorm. We have come a long way. I don't mind telling you, as this is very much top of mind, we have come a long way. Visually, questing, story, everything that you actually gameplay, we have come a long way since Burning Crusade. And I don't know that we would be served by forcing people to go back through that. Because we've gotten much better as storytellers, we've gotten much better as game developers of just having better gameplay over time. And I have a lot of nostalgia for Burning Crusade. I love it, but it would be it's a hard road to say, hey, you have to go back.
But I think that both with achievements in Transmog,
Sure.
and you had the achievements in the rating with the, what was it called? The pet achievements?
Pet battles, yep.
No, where you picked up pets and nice ramens.
Oh yeah, sure. There's a pet, there's different pet achievements that you get at different pet metas. Yep.
Wasn't that to, I don't reuse in a bad way.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Give people different things to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And bring them back into.
But it ends up being optional, right? It's highly optional. There's nothing that you, like getting Mr. Bigglesworth is awesome for those people who that means something to. For a player that just boosted today and is ready to play World of Warcraft, they don't even know who Mr. Bigglesworth is. Maybe they do because they play Hearthstone. But in general, they probably don't even know who Mr. Bigglesworth is, and so it doesn't mean anything to them. But for people who either were in that or went through that, or just very hardcore pet collectors, like I think that's maybe something that you're speaking to as well, is having different axes for the different kind of player types that we were discussing earlier, to have different things that they can do.
I would add to that, it's when we put the pets into some of the old raids, people were already doing nostalgia runs to pick up. Some of us even before Transmog was around. because it was, you know, to go back and just to have, sure, it's not the same when you can do it by yourself, but it's still cool. And you go through there, and like I can, like when I do Kara runs all the time, I think about, you know, certain wipes and memorable victories with my friends, and so even looking at to your point about boost to 90, like looking at that tough choice. And we find ourselves in these all the time where, and the choice that we settled on was, we believe that playing with your friends is one of the most enjoyable experiences in World of Warcraft. And for someone who wants to come back, or for someone who's being invited in to experience that with their friends, we felt it would be better to have them be able to go through and experience Warlords real time with those friends. And then there's all those worlds, and there's all that past that they can go back and still experience, you know, while they're at max level, and see the story, experience the environments, you know, have, you know, do the quests. And after all, when you're, the things you want to go back and see, and the things that when you think about a given zone, it's not, I got so much gold when I was in there, or I got so many cool greens when I was in there. It's what you saw, and we felt like that was a good compromise, because they could still go back and live the part that we all have that emotion around, but still get to be with their friends for this new, fresh stuff.
You say that as a developer, it's hard to leave things behind.
Sometimes.
Sometimes not. And based on what you're saying here, it sounds like you're planning to leave garrisons behind. So this being something you have worked a lot on, and being such a major feature, shouldn't there be possible for it to be a way for this technology to be transferred into the new expansion? Isn't that something they should like to do, even though they can't move their...
They're not going to pull a Dalaran and yank their garrison out of the ground and float it over the next expansion. No, they're not going to. That's a good idea. But your garrison orb, that is not happening.
Like Dalaran?
Yeah, that is not happening.
Garrison Dalaran.
Garrison Dalaran, yeah, right here at the convention center. No, but to your point, the technology that enabled that experience, the thing we were touching on earlier, there are core elements of the technology around the farm that we use to leverage and start with garrisons, and you know, when you guys get in and experience garrisons, I think folks are going to be delighted at just how expressive and rich this little, you know, microcosm of your own is. And if history is any indicator, we're psyched, and we think everyone else will be, about what we harvest from the garrison's experience and carry forward.
Yeah, I agree with everything Barry said. I mean, I think the only thing I would add is, I don't think any of you are sitting around right now saying,
no,
why are you not bringing the farm forward? If only you would bring the farm forward. Like, you're not saying that, and I think you'll be in the same position with garrisons.
Yeah.
Also about garrisons, it seems really cool and all, but what will the garrison have to say for the experience going into the end game? How will it influence how the players experience the game?
Yeah, we actually don't know how we're going to update the garrison as we go forward. A lot of that is going to depend on how things actually kind of shake out as we get through. But certainly there'll be different. One of the neat things that we've talked about, or that we have in the game, is this idea of, I built my garrison and then it comes under attack by, you know, ogres or trolls or whatever. Like, there could be different kind of garrison invasions, and I have to get my buddy to come help me, and hey, my garrison's under garrison invasion, come help me out. So we know we want to potentially look into that system and expanding that out. We think there'll be itemization that comes out of that, and different things that the players can do. But I think, you know, mostly, you know, things that we add to the system for kind of future patches is not something we actually know exactly what we're going to do yet. And that's not unusual. We often want to wait to see how things go to kind of make sure we know exactly what the right next step is.
Is there any chance we'll get to see different skins on the garrisons? Because as a Blood Elf, for instance, I don't want to build my Garrison in a filthy orc style.
Okay, so you've got some faction issues that I need you to work through.
Yeah.
Because those orcs, they're your buddies. But having said that, yeah, we originally, that was the intent, was to have all different kinds of buildings, but the way that the Garrison feature evolved, it ends up being 100 different buildings that we've created. And it sounds awesome to just say, oh, I'm gonna put a new skin on that building, but I promise you wouldn't be happy with that. It would not look like a Blood Elf building if we took the orc buildings and put it in skin. Like, it would be a new building that we'd have to construct for each one of those. And we talked earlier about the amount of time between the last patch and this patch. Yeah. Did not seem like the right decision once we got into it. But obviously that's something that we would love to do.
Okay, so I want to ask about the crossroad zones.
Okay.
Do you feel they were a success, and also about the technical standpoint, given the smooth transitions that happened when you moved from server to server? How difficult was it to develop such a sophisticated feature, and do you have any plans for any updates in the future for the technology?
Yes, and a lot of it you're going to see in Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah.
I think it was a very difficult feature. It's one of the more top technical, more complicated features that we actually have in WoW. What it has given us is the freedom to help players play together. That's really the idea, is how can we help players have ways for them to play with each other. And you saw the addition of the group finder feature that we put in 6.0 to kind of help facilitate that as well. For finding people from all different zones who want to go off and do your another storm questing achievement if that's something that you need help with or whatever. Just a random example.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yes, we have the ability to coalesce zones. We also have the ability to split zones. We've developed one of the more complicated technical features that we developed in Warlords is this concept of seamless instances. So your garrison is actually in its own instance, and theoretically you never know that. Theoretically you never see that. And how that could extend in the future, we think is pretty exciting. Imagine, I don't know that we'll be able to get to the point where we can actually have you go into the raid and not see a loading screen, but that is something we would like to do.
And so it's fun to play with other people. There's such a thing as playing with too many other people, which makes things suboptimal. So like one of the aspects of these technical investments as well is, in the same way that we can bring more people together to make it not feel barren or too quiet, when things surge or something's very popular, also the ability to scale that out and not have it be a degraded experience. So there are definite evolutions in Warlords, and I think some of it you're going to experience in Garrisons and in our instancing.
The server technology in terms of the ability to split zones, combine zones arbitrarily has never been more flexible and more advanced than in 6.0. So we're really excited.
Speaking of Netherstorm and other old zones, you've certainly come a long way, as I say, and the jump from each expansion has been significant. I remember it. Wrath, the zoning started, and that was awesome. And it's increased in Cataclysm, and further in Mist of Pandaria with more cinematics and much more easy to follow story. And I was wondering how you're going to evolve this in Warlords of Draenor, and are there any specific new features that we're going to see more of, stuff like that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did in Warlords was to try to concentrate the story a little bit more on what we consider kind of a main path, and then kind of introduce these objectives off to the side that ended up being kind of side objectives or side quests. We'll see how that ends up going. We tried a lot of different iterations and weren't happy with a lot of things before we ended up where we are. But the idea of being able to kind of separate side objectives and side quests that are not really advancing the story and kind of its own bucket that you can do or not, optional kind of things. So we'll take additional steps down that road. I think we also wanted to make it a lot clearer what the kind of the key points in the zone storytelling are, so you kind of see some progression that you're making a little bit. So we'll kind of see how that works out. That's definitely something we talked about. We do feel like that we went a little too far on what we call the cutscenes, and that sometimes you would see scenes that they were cool, but maybe there were too many of them. And so what if we had fewer, but they were more impactful, was sort of one of the things that we were trying to do for this expansion as well. Yeah. But you're right, every expansion we do a little bit, try to do a little bit more. This is no different.
You obviously have the technology to scale content, like Black Mode, for example. Wouldn't it be possible to allow players to set their own difficulty for raids, so that, for example, hardcore raid guilds could play the raid even harder in a harder difficulty, or that you could play previous raids like Ice Throne or something like that, scale to your scale so that it is as hard as it was when you played it at level 80.
Yeah. The challenge there ends up being the itemization. Yeah. And what do you get? It would not necessarily, it would not be impossible for us to, have a Lich King encounter that was as difficult as a mythic encounter in Warlords of Draenor. But what happens when the Lich King dies? And if your answer is, well, you get loot that's appropriate for that difficulty, well, now we have to consider the itemization of every boss that we're going to allow to do that in terms of how we're going to do the item spread. And additionally, would you believe that players are amazing at finding the min-max way to do things? And so we could end up in a situation where, well, the best way to do it is to just play a, Molten Core Ragnaros, and you can just melt those guys down because their mechanics and their abilities are so simple. And then you can get the best loot in the game, which feels really broken. Does that make sense?
And part of that, like with there's something about having that common scale. To the comment earlier about competitive PvE, one of the things that adds to the sense of accomplishment is it's a common set. So if you in Warlords, if you say that you're currently well into Mythic and Foundry by February, wow, look at you! Everyone knows what that means. But whereas if it's the same itemization, and you say we took Mythic to 11. Oh, what different happened? Nothing. It was arbitrarily harder. Well, cool story, bro. It's not as shared and makes that sense of accomplishment harder. But we do think that the flex, the scalability that the flex technology gives us makes it so that when you can't, I guess we would tend to err on the side of making it more common and more enjoyable, and when you have shortfalls to accommodate that, rather than tuning ever and ever toward more esoteric tiers, heavens of difficulty. Yeah.
There's actually a funny piece that I'm not going to remember exactly about, but it was a couple of years ago when we started introducing all the different difficulty levels, and there was this satire piece about, there's going to be a level 1000 difficulty in Warlords of Draenor, and it was Mike Morheim talking, but if you beat the final boss on level 1000 difficulty, you get to be CEO of Blizzard. Like that was just, we're going to have thousands of difficulties that people can choose. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But you are bringing back Molten Core for a while, right?
We are for the 10-year anniversary, which is a little different. And the rewards that you get from that are not gear, right? The rewards that you get for that are nostalgia items.
Yes. Yeah. 40-man LFR is what Molten Core is going to be.
And we think you're going to run that once, right? You're going to get all your items once, right? So, I mean, if you think about it, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in Molten Core, one of the bosses that I spent several weeks on was Baron Geddon. Baron Geddon is the simplest, dumbest fight in the entire world now, right? You have a tank that stands in the middle, everyone stands around in a circle, everyone does DPS, every once in a while someone gets a bomb, they run away, the bomb explodes, they come back, you melt the boss down. It took us weeks to beat that boss. And that mechanic is so simple. We would not even put a mechanic that simple in a dungeon, a normal dungeon. Just the player sophistication is crazy now. It's players are very sophisticated. And there's just no way that we could have such a simple mechanic be on a boss. People would laugh. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting for people to go back to Molten Core, and for people who did it back in the day when it was really hard, and wow, we spent so much time on this guy, and it's so easy. Yeah.
How has the game changed the most over the 10 years?
Well, I think player sophistication and boss mechanics is definitely, I don't know if it's number one, but it's in that list. I mean, just thinking about the different mechanics that exist in Molten Core and the different mechanics that exist in Siege of Orgrimmar, like there's just no comparison. And you would never have imagined, the Molten Core players could never have imagined that they would ever be able to be successful in a Siege of Orgrimmar style thing with so many different phases and so many different kind of mechanics. That's definitely something that's changed dramatically. I think artistically the game has grown dramatically, particularly, I think each, you talked about each expansion doing different things and having different, going back, sorry to bring up Nostorm again, but wow, it's amazing how much better the stuff that we make today looks. It's amazing how much better the stuff today looks. And it was such a stark contrast because it literally was this weekend that I was doing that, so.
It's one of the exciting things about Warlords being a return to Draenor.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's because of where we were at, and for those of you who played through Draenor back in the Burning Crusade, if you were like me, it's outland. It's in a state of ruin because of the corruption. And for me, as I was going around and questing, I couldn't help but wonder, what did this place look like before all this bad stuff happened? Mm-hmm. So to be able to have our artists and designers creating Warlords around the idea of, what does a Draenor at its height, in its healthy state look like, to be able to be exploring that creatively with this many years of advancement in art and design within the game. Super psyched for everybody to get their hands on that and experience that.
So launch is soon, and you're talking about phasing a little
Wait,
while.
what?
Launch of Warlords.
Oh,
Really soon.
dude, really?
Really soon.
We gotta go.
Yeah. Phasing. Do you have like a magic number for how many people is like too much in a certain phase? Because I mean, you were saying you want a good balance, but some people prefer more, some people prefer less. How much are we going to see of other players in that starting zone when we go through the Dark Portal? Because it feels good seeing a whole bunch of players running the same objectives as you've seen this army of players smash through there. Do you have that number in mind? Is there? Did you consider that?
It really depends a lot more about what it is that you're doing is a huge factor as well, right? The number of people that can be, attacking Defias Brotherhood who are wandering around an empty zone is significantly higher than the number of people that can be working to defeat, Gul'dan, who is guarding this one box, right? So just thinking about that gameplay. So the objectives matter as well, and the activities that players are doing matter as well. But I agree, the appeal of MMOs is that army of players, and you want that army kind of feeling. Yeah.
So did you, for instance, in the starting zone, manage to split it into these mini phases? So when you complete the quest, I think it jumps to a different phase, and then you've got that all separate?
Yes.
Okay. And they've got different amounts of players allowing each?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, I understand. Perfect.
And hopefully we guessed right.
We'll see. I'll
Yeah.
be good with that.
Okay, I know you will. Yeah.
So we spoke about the Molten Core return and the nostalgia items there. Wouldn't that be a way to justify higher difficulty raids or dungeons? Because I mean, people love worthless stuff that they can show off to others. So if they did rate at the highest difficulty they could get like an awesome mount or stuff like that, isn't that? Yeah.
I think that, you know, the molten core thing is a neat experiment, and we'll see how that goes. Ultimately, I think people are interested in having their character be more powerful first. And so I think there's a limit, like, I think there's definite utility in, hey, here's this pet you can earn, here's this mount you can earn from doing this thing. But I think when players are faced with the, I can do this thing and I can get better gear, I can do this thing and I get cosmetic items, I think we know what players are going to choose. So, you know, the molten core thing is, I think, a great thing for whenever we have, we don't have the next piece of gear that you can get, like as a kind of an alternate advancement kind of a thing, or for these nostalgia type things. I think is a great tool, great purpose for that. But I don't think that it would take the place of a situation where, hey, I want to have my character become more powerful.
Well, folks, we've got about 5 more minutes, so a couple more questions.
So now after you've shelved the next gen ML, will you consider entering more markets with more localized versions of WoW in the future, or are you satisfied with the languages you operate in currently?
So about every year we look at where the rest of the, kind of the world is in terms of their internet infrastructure and their pricing capabilities and all these different things. The decision for us to not open up in other languages is not related to the other MMO that we were working on. We have discussions about every year to say, okay, now does it seem right to enter, insert name of country. Part of the problem is the localization aspect of WoW is incredibly significant. There are, I want to say, 6 million words that need to get translated, and there are literally gigabytes of audio that has to get re-recorded into that native language. So it is not a easy task to just decide to go into another market, and so it needs to be a pretty significant size for us to kind of want to take that on. There's another problem too, which is once we're localizing in that language, we're localizing in that language forever, right? So there's not really an experiment that we can run where we say, hey, we're going to try to go into, insert name of country. Oh, hey, that didn't work out. Now you're kind of in on that country for the rest of WoW's life.
There's a third challenge as well, actually, Joe, which is all of our customer service.
Totally.
Obviously, we have to hire whole new people to support the language, the community blogs, the forums, everything. So everything gets exponential very quickly when you get into languages.
Yeah, it's not just on the game side. Yeah.
Why can't you save transmogs?
Transmog payment system, you actually announced that. You said you were working on something for a future patch. Maybe you could just tell him about that.
Okay, yeah, because right now if I transmog something and I sell the item that I transmogged from, or throw that away, I can transmog a new item.
I see, yes. Yeah, so we are working on a system that, our transmog is sort of the 1.0 version of transmog. We're kind of working on the, what is the 1.2 or 1.5 version of transmog. That's a very common issue that people have kind of come up with. So we definitely want to take a next step on what we're going to do with transmog.
Right. So what was that new patch?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay. Right.
Have you decided which package is going to be the troll raid?
We have not. Very funny. It's very funny. Actually, we didn't. Oh, we did do a troll raid. God dang it! I was just going to say, no, we didn't do a troll raid in Miss Pandora, but of course we did. Yeah, we did.
Actually, you said that it was the raid series that was the most popular.
Yes.
Does that mean that you will be focusing on that, or will you be doing the interval with a non-raid tier patch?
We will have patches that will have non-raid tiers.
One more short question.
Make it a good one.
I have a really good one.
All right.
When is the Blood Elf model coming out?
They're actively being worked on, and our goal is to have them done by the first patch.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your BlizzCon.